Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out my YouTube channel today, The Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages. As always, I am your host, Nick Barksdale, and today we are joined by a very special guest. Many of you are going to take one look. You know who he is. You've read his books. You've watched his lectures. You've listened to him. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Cline.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
So, speaking of Dr. Louise Hitchcock, I actually do have a question for you from her. Not that you know her or anything, of course.
I've known her since 1984. We rode our bicycles to the Olympics together in Los Angeles. Yeah.
She put this question forward on Facebook when I was kind of polling, wanting to get some extra questions in there. And that is, why is plague mentioned very little in 1177 BC?
Excellent question. And in fact, that question comes up after my lecture, whenever I give the lecture. The simple answer is because we don't have any evidence for it yet. There's no evidence. Now, having said that, I think that plague must have played a role. It's inconceivable that it didn't. I mean, you've got the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? And plague is one of them. And if you've got famine and drought and earthquakes and invaders and all that, usually infection and plague and all that comes hand in hand. So I'm actually very surprised that it's not part of it. I have now put in a short section into the revised version addressing that, because that's a question, like I say, I get after every time I lecture on it. But the simple answer is we don't have any evidence yet. There's no mass graves anywhere. There are no skeletons or bodies that are showing evidence of plague or anything. But of course, bear in mind, if it happened really fast, it probably wouldn't have had time to necessarily show in the skeletons. Other things like malaria, you can see it in the skeletons. So it may have been, if it's fast moving enough, that it wouldn't have left its mark. But to my mind, the most suspicious thing is that we don't have any evidence in the texts. Nobody writes about it. They write about drought, they write about famine, they write about invaders. They do not write about disease or infections or plague or anything. Again, it might have happened too soon and that they didn't have it, and that whoever would have written about it died before they could write about it. And I'm kind of reminded of Monty Python and the cave of, arg, when he writes, because he's dying as he writes. So I don't know how you write arg as you go, but never mind. So I say in the revised edition, I will not be in the least surprised if in the future we come up with evidence for plague at this time. But at the moment, we simply don't have it, which is really interesting. So got everything else. Everything else that could possibly have gone wrong went wrong, but plague is not there yet. But, this is archaeology. We could find another cemetery somewhere this coming summer, and in it will be mass graves of, typhoid victims or whatever. And then we'll go, okay, so there is plague. But at the moment, it's the one thing that we're missing.
It's absolutely fascinating. Very true. Very true. And like you said, you would expect that there would be something there, but the fact that even like you said, texts don't mention it and stuff like that is a pretty good indicator that we may just not know yet.
Well, right. The one thing that does come to mind, but you've got in the Trojan War, Homer tells us that a plague rips through the Mycenaean camp before they actually capture Troy. And there's been a bunch of discussion about what could that plague have possibly been. And since the Trojan War is about this time period, right, anywhere between 1250 and 1177, it is perhaps relevant that Homer mentions a plague at about this time. And of course, don't forget with the Exodus, you've got the plagues in Egypt. And again, depends on when you date it. I happen to date it to about 1250 BC, even though archaeologically speaking, we've got no evidence for it, but whatever. But you have to mention those plagues. So the only evidence we've got is two somewhat, shall we say, debated episodes, both of them mentioning plague. And that's about as close as we get. It's worth a mention, but nothing archaeological to substantiate either of them. As is the case like with the plague that hit Athens during the reign of Pericles in the 5th century, we don't know what it was. right? Is it typhoid? Is it cholera? Is it a version of the Black Death, bubonic plague? What is going on? Da, 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 da. Same thing here. We don't know what the plague was that hit the Mycenaeans of Troy. We don't know what it was with the Exodus, but we'll see. Bits and pieces like this. It's like a jigsaw puzzle where you don't have the picture on the cover, and your dog has eaten half of the pieces. But good luck. We'll get a portion of the picture at some point.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to check out the links in the video description below, where you can also acquire Digging Up Armageddon, the search for the lost city of Solomon by none other than Dr. Eric Cline. It is a fantastic book that takes you through not just the history of Megiddo, but the history of those who brought it to our understanding, who guided us through it, who excavated it, the hardships and drama that they endured, and the fascinating stories of the men and women who shaped archaeology of their day. It comes in a book format. You can get it on Kindle, but also what is absolutely fantastic is if you get and download the audiobook, you get to listen to Dr. Eric Cline himself take you through his awesome work. And I can't recommend it enough.